They're finally here, guys. The patch notes are finally out for Season 8, and yeah, I'm one of those guys now. I'm literally going to read the patch and make it into a video so you can all do it. I'm sure you've all seen it, and this is going to be the noobs take the platinum perspective, if you like. So I'm just going to literally read through them and see what's coming up and just my thoughts, really, and how I think it's going to affect our games. So I'm not going to read all of the bump. You've probably already read that if you're already coming here. We're just going to go actually straight into the changes. We're not going to look at the events because nobody wants to do those. We're all here for ranked now, and as much as I like the pretty emblems, we're going to skip that as well. So the map pool, I'm going to be focusing on 1v1 because I don't play much teams, but I will show it in a second. So we've got Dry Arabia. They always call it a weird name, but Dry Arabia, fine. Cliffside, okay. Rocky River, fine. Himayama, okay. Gorge, Hill and Dale, Canal, Pit, and Baltic. Okay, so I don't really play water or hybrids, so Canal and Baltic will definitely be out. So actually, it's not a bad pull. I will also have a third ban, so I probably can get rid of Cliffside if I want to. But Gorge I like, Rocky River I like, and Dry Arabia I like. Hill and Dale's also fun. I haven't played that in a while, so that'll be a nice map. And yeah, the pit, I played that in a tournament recently, the Agoj tournament, so definitely have to figure out how that works. But yeah, I'd say that's pretty nice, a nice little variety, no sort of crazy maps, no hidden valley or any of that sort of nonsense, and I'm really glad that Forts is gone. So yeah, I would say that's a pretty good pull for now. Hopefully we're going to see a little bit more rotation on that pull as well, but we'll just have to wait and see. Let's go over to the team rank. So we have Dry Arabia, Cliffside, Rocky River, Canal, Gorge, Migration, Hideouts, Forts, and Waterholes. So fairly similar. Obviously, some weird ones like Forts, but and Migration, I guess, if you like to play that. But if you're into team ranked, that's your pool. But we're going to go into the big changes then. So we're unveiling the new map Socotra. Okay, so if you haven't seen that, that was one of the EGC special maps that they made. It's a tiny little spit of land surrounded by water, but the water has no fish. Yeah, it's a really weird one. There's probably a reason why it's not in the ranked pool. So we'll see that. And then we have a design rework attack move. We've made an adjustment to the default attack move behavior designed to help prevent accidental misclicks. On PC, this can be changed back by setting the attack move behavior setting under Game Options to Legacy. Check out the full details of this rework below. So interesting. So I'm guessing that's basically when you aim move, if you actually hit a unit or a building, they still basically just target that unit or building. So I imagine what they're trying to do is if you aim move, it's going to aim move no matter what you end up clicking on. So that should make it a lot easier for people like me who have zero micro. So this sounds pretty interesting. General, fixed an issue with scouts skip their reload animations. Yeah, I'm not too fussed about the reload animations. That's absolutely fine. AI updates. If you're playing loads of AI, just pause the video and read those. We're going to be focusing on the ranked stuff. So yeah, AI and campaign stuff, we're going to just sort of skip over. Using the hotkey combination to Q build multiple shift units, shift Q, on the mercenary house works again. Okay, I have no idea what that was, but I've never had a problem with my mercenary house as far as I know, so maybe this is one that I haven't come across. Dervishes and warrior monks no longer selected with military shortcuts. Scouts no longer selected with military shortcuts. Okay, so a lot of people are going to like this. I've heard a lot of people saying they don't want dervishes selected as military, so I think that's really, really good. Population capacity reached will only be shown once, even if multiple units are produced at once. Okay, I think that's pretty good. To be honest, if I'm capped, yeah, I'm not sure that the pop-up actually always helps me, but you know, for people who actually can see those things popping up on the screen, I'm sure that's really good. Added a free-for-all map pool and allowed for the map vetoes to be specific in that pool. Okay, so if you're playing lots of free-for-all, I haven't tested it out, but generally because the games go really, really long and I don't have time to play an hour, 2 hour games. So and that's why I haven't checked that out, but that's pretty good for people who are into free-for-all. Then some localization stuff, which again, we will skip. So this is the Socotra one. I'm not going to go too much into it because it's not actually in the rank pool, but if you saw the tournament, it's pretty crazy, and you end up seeing people making ships and going around and shooting the back resources, as well as, like, you know, Rus or English putting their White Tower or their Kremlin on the other person's base and stuff like that. So if you want some crazy games with water battles without any fish, then have at it, have some fun. So, general map changes. Sheep now produce 200 food instead of 250. Right, okay, and 2 additional sheep spawn under each player's starting town centre, so this is quite a big change. So the intention of the changes above is to guarantee a safe amount of sheep for each player and reduce the chances of games swinging as a result of one player getting the majority of the sheep on the map. With this change, the overall food on the standard map is kept mostly the same, reduced by only 200 per player. Okay, so basically I think the idea of this is that if one person's really lucky with the sheep haul and they get, I don't know, 10, 15, because they're 250 food each, that makes a huge difference. Whereas reducing it that way does mean that sort of the difference of 2 or 3 sheep either way doesn't mean it's massively in one person's favour or the other. Obviously, you still want to get more sheep, but I think this sounds pretty good. Again, I'm not sure whether this is going to affect me personally too much because, I don't have the min-max macro skills to make the most of it, but I think that sounds pretty interesting. And having the 2 extra sheep, I think that's I can't do the maths, but I'm pretty sure that just means you end up with the same starting food. So yeah, sounds pretty good to me. So some map-specific changes. Baltic fixed an issue with pit mines and Uvus cannot be built due to tree spawning. That sounds pretty good if you're Malian or you are Mongols. Cliffside. Neutral gold and stone mines no longer spawn on the cliff side in a way that prevents Uvu and pit placement. Again, so good for Mongols. And so all of these seem to be Mongol and Malian base with Uvus and pits. So neutral gold, they don't block the spawn of the Uvus, and Warring Islands fixed a crash that would happen when generating a map with team games on a small map size. Okay, so that's pretty good. So basically, if you're playing Malians and Mongols, hopefully your Uvus and your pit mines shouldn't be prevented now, and you can get those guys up and running. Let's have a look at the balance and bug fixes then. So general changes and bug fixes. Fixed an issue that caused performance issues when interacting with the player profile. Okay, that's fine. Fixed a bug where the game would crash if the player clicked on a unit and upgrade in the global queue during a replay and free. So these are all these ones. So let's get to the big stuff, the design rework attack move. So we've made an adjustment to the default attack move behavior. Previously, when issuing an attack move to a unit or building, the attack move was converted into a forced attack command as if you'd right click the target instead. This made it particularly difficult to use the attack move around areas with a lot of farms and would often lead to misclicks when you accidentally attack move a unit in a group instead of on the ground nearby. So I've had this loads and loads of times. If you're attacking somebody's base and you accidentally click a house or a farm or something like that, then all of your units stream at that thing and just get absolutely melted by TC fire or the other units. So sounds really, really good. The new default attack move behavior always treats the attack move as a ground click, so that when you issue an attack move to a unit or building, your units will attack move to their location. And then you can change it back on PC. So this is really, really nice. I won't be changing that back, and then it just means I can right-click if I want to target fire, and I can A move for everything else. So, and also, if you're like me, one little tip that I have been given recently that I think is really, really good, when you're moving your units across the map, don't normal move them, A move them when you're positioning to attack the other person's base, because then if you cross their armies on the path, you'll immediately start attacking them. So it's a really good idea. If you're crossing the map, then make sure you A move your army, even if it's in one big group, and then if you come across any of the enemy units or villagers or anything like that, you're not just going to run past them, which I've had happen quite a lot. So, game mode domination. When a king's garrisoned in a transport city, it was no longer possible to delete the ship. So yeah, I've heard about this where people will delete their kings and stuff like that, which if you play free-for-all, I know a lot of people are not very happy about that. So, balance and gameplay changes for all civilizations. Docks and House of Wisdom now have both an economic and a military rally point. When setting a rally with right-click, setting the target to a fishing deposit or a trade settlement would default to a setting an economic rally, while anything else will set a military rally. Fishing ships and traders will only travel to an economic rally when they are created, and all other ships will travel to a military one. Okay, so I think that's pretty clever, because obviously the House of Wisdom can produce economic units like traders. It can also produce military stuff from like the military wing, or the Ibids get the camels. So I think having that option is really good, because otherwise you end up sending all of your fishing ships to where your military's going or something like that. So sounds pretty good to me. Rally points can now be queued using the hotkey or command card. Okay, not sure what that is. I imagine the command card is on the user interface. I just click the building and right click, so that Sure, okay, that sounds fun. It's now possible to buy and sell resources at the market in batches of 500 by holding shift while pressing the buy sell button. So for late game, that's pretty good. If you're buying and selling loads of resources to do a wonder drop or something like that, then you don't have to just hammer that button. So I think that sounds generally pretty good. After defeating a forced attack target, buildings will scan for a new target instead of always falling back to their previous target. Okay, so some better AI in terms of targeting. So buildings, I'm guessing we're talking about keeps and towers and TCs. So yeah, that's pretty good about where it's identifying the different targets. As long as it's not all just shooting rams and avoiding the army, then I think we're all too good. Siege weapons that are too close to their target to fire on them will now automatically move away from the target to a position where they're able to fire. They will only do this if they are attacking a target that cannot move, such as a building. Okay, that's pretty good. So yeah, if you've got a mangonel that's right up against a building and you click it, then mangonel will literally move back and then it will attack it. The same with trebuchets and stuff. So that sounds pretty useful if you end up remembering to make siege, which that's one of my goals for season 8, guys. We're going to use some siege. Horseman range increased from 0.29 to 0.38. Okay, so I guess the range is actually going to be quite helpful because it means that you'll be able to do a bit more damage before the spears come in. So that's kind of like a mini buff to horses. I quite like that. Obviously, the Sipahi already have that increased range, and Ghazi just have the adjusted damage. So theirs obviously haven't changed. But I think this could potentially mean that horsemen are going to be able to do a little bit more damage and not be so easily countered by spears if the spears are micro correctly. So hopefully this gives the horsemen just that little tiny buff they need to be super useful. Then, if we say secondary town centres have had garrison slots increased from 7 to 8, so tiny buff to second TCs. Obviously, they reduced it a while ago because they were super defensive and you could chuck all your villagers in there and never get hit. So obviously, just that little buff just to try and encourage some more 2 TC play. I think that's pretty good, adding a bit more variety. And villagers will now deposit carried resources after completing construction of a farm. Nice, because obviously they changed it where it would be on any drop off, and so now if you make a farm they automatically drop off. That's really good. So if you grab all your wood villagers and make farms, you don't have to worry about dropping them off somewhere and then building the farms. You can just send them to build farms. So that sounds pretty good to me. On to naval updates then. So I don't play water, but for anyone who does, the dehowls and the canoes now fire arrows from the head of the ship instead of the center, so I'm sure that makes a difference in terms of attacking. The heated shot. Arter ships now switch to incendiary arrows effects after researching heated shot. Visual representation of the upgrade only. Okay, so that heated shot must change the arrow shots. Again, I don't play water, so I have no idea what this means, but I hope if you are playing water, you find this useful. Fishing boat line of sight reduced by 25%. Fishing boat train time increased from 25 to 30. Okay, so slightly making food eco take a little bit longer to kick in because they're taking longer to produce, and they have less line of sight, so they're more easily taken out by military. I think that sounds interesting. Iobids and Abbasid docks now only show the range for the healing aura. Okay, because they get a special healing aura as one of their civ bonuses. So nice, some little tweaks to the naval part of the game. Let's get on to the civ specific ones. So I know there's a lot of people waiting for some big changes to some civs and little ones to others. So let's see what they've gone for. So the Abbasid dynasty corrected a bug where medical centers would persist on destroyed landmarks capitals. Okay, so Abbasids are basically the same, just a small bug that's been fixed. So I think Abbasids at the moment are actually in a really good spot and super flexible with loads of nice upgrades. So I think that makes sense. My babies, the Byzantine, what's happening? So Olive Grove costs increased from 60 to 70. I think that's fair. I think because they produce that extra resource, I think having them actually a lot cheaper is super good. Obviously, it's going to be harder to get those early groves out, which a lot of people have been doing this season. But I think with the extra oil that they get and the amount of resources they can gather so early in the game, that does kind of make sense that they're still a little bit cheaper, but not as much. The Drummond move speed increased from 1.38 to 1.5, and the Drummond Greek fire base damage increased from 2 to 4. So this is, again, that's the fire ship, which I believe is the Sprinkled ship, so they've just increased the potential of that, because a lot of people have said it's really, really weak. So then we also have corrected an issue where Pilgrim Flask would overlap with shield wall on Limiter when playing on Xbox. So if you play on Xbox, those won't overlap now. And olive oil is properly deposited when a villager carrying it is garrisoned. Okay, so if you garrison villagers, normally they drop off resources if it's in a TC. So now they'll do that with olive oil. So only a small change to Byzantines. I think this is fair. A lot of people have been saying that Byzantines are very overpowered, but obviously a lot of it comes from the oil. So and there are a lot of very good counters to the Byzantines, as you'll see if you watch any of my games. But I think that olive grove change is pretty fair. It's not a huge nerf, but it's enough that it's going to slow down that early grove economy if that's what you're going for. So I think that's all fair in Love and War. Let's have a look at the Chinese then. So, Chinese, increase the radius of the Imperial Palace spy ability from 1.25 to 3. Okay, increase the duration of the Imperial Palace spy ability from 10 to 15 seconds, and corrected an issue where the battering ram was missing from the Shogunnu radial menu. So, the radial menu is on Xbox, so if you're playing on Xbox, that's a nice little fix. Obviously, they're trying to increase the Imperial Palace spy ability because it's not really the preferred landmark and people don't really use it a huge amount, so making it have an increased radius and duration is just going to be quite useful to get people to actually use it. But other than that, China's in a pretty good spot, so pretty much as is. So if you're a China main, keep pumping those Shogunnu exactly like you've been doing. The Delhi Sultanate. So upgrades now count towards the technology score based on the upgrades based time cost. Okay, so if you're looking at the scores at the end, Delhi's technology score always showed as basically 0. So this will be good so you can actually compare how you did overall with researches. Fishing ship damage decreased from 7 to 6, so their ships are slightly less good with attack as Delhi get attacking with their fishing ships. Garrison scholars in docks production speed modifier decreased from 30 to 20. So with efficient production, you can put a scholar in the docks and it produces the ships faster like they do with their military. So that's been nerfed a tiny bit. The Hisar Academy can now be selected with research shortcuts. So that's a nice little shortcut buff. Fishing boat arrows no longer miss their targets. Okay, so that's why the damage has been decreased, because they are always hit their homing like the normal arrows. Manuscript trade is now a default bonus for the civilization. So again, another water buff. Docks garrison capacity increased from 3 to 4. Docks now generate influence as a mosque does, and Docks will now provide a free scholar in its garrison if it was the first dock constructed before a mosque. Okay, so for water play, you don't need to build a mosque because you can build a dock, and then it works as a mosque, creating that influence and giving you your first scholar. So if you're playing Delhi on water, I think that all sounds pretty fantastic. But other than that, Delhi are going to keep going as they are and enjoying those elephants along the way. To the English, King train time increased from 35 to 50 seconds, and White Tower production speed reduced from 100 to 75. These are pretty good. So having that king coming out much more slowly means you're not going to be pressured as much as the opponent. It also gives you a little bit more room to do some damage if you want to. So having that out a little bit slower just means that you're not going to be scrambling to defend a king that comes out super, super quickly. The White Tower production speed buff, no, it's a tiny little nerf. Really, I think a lot of people were hoping that the garrison capacity would be reduced, because when you've got, let's say, 2 TCs and the White Tower, once you hit castle at 8 or 9 minutes, you can garrison every single villager you have, and then they fire all of those increased arrows. So I think this is good to have a little nerf, but I think that garrison really needs to be looked at, because it's just, when you build your base like that, it's super hard to push. And obviously my lowest win rate is English, so any nerf to English is good for me. French. Town centres work 10, 15, 20, 25, faster per age, change to 15, 15, 20, 25. Okay, so this is a tiny change so that in Dark Age they get those villagers a little bit faster, because the French buff is that as you age up you get increased villager production. So they've changed Dark Age now, so it's already going to be quicker. So for those first 2 minutes you're an extra 15%, so that's a nice little eco buff. The Red Palace landmark influence increased by +1 tile to match normal keeps, so the Red Palace is still super strong, and it's now just got the one tile influence. I think that makes sense, because the French get a buff from having their keeps with production buildings, because it reduces the cost of their units. So the Red Palace works in the same way. The artillery shot has now been reworked targeted ability that increases the range of the cannon by +5 tiles and damage by 30% for one shot, can only target buildings, can target and shoot into Fog of War, reveal the shot location through Fog for 3 seconds, 200-second cooldown. So that's a special unique ability that somebody in the French army gets to use. So I'm not sure exactly how that works, but if you get to try that out, definitely let me know. Put a comment below of how you're going to see that used. But it looks like it's a special shot that you can use. So also the fact it goes through Fog of War means you can use it to, I guess, hit buildings and hit siege and stuff like that. So it seems like it's a bit of a snipe ability for. I imagine it's a keep, but yeah, not having played the French, I don't know this particular technology off the top of my head. So hopefully, if you're a French main, you'll be able to fill me in as well. HRE, marching drills move speed bonus decreased to 5% in Dark Age and 10% from Feudal onwards. So I think this is quite nice because they get it for free, and it just means that they're not going to be able to be running around like Usain Bolt in the Dark Age doing spear staff and tower rushes and stuff like that. They still have a slight buff, but I think having it where it then increases in Feudal, so then you still get the full pump, is really good. But apart from that, HRE I think is in a really strong spot. I used to play them quite a bit, and I think having that marching drills for free has really allowed them to open up in Feudal and not just do castle rushes. So yeah, I think they're strong, not unbeatable, but I think they're in a really good spot, and having that flexibility to not only do castle rushes like they did before just means that you actually have to scout them and see what they're doing. So I think that's pretty good. Let's have a look at the Japanese then. Shinobi blink cast time reduced from 0.85 to 4, so you can teleport much more easily. The Shinobi sabotage cast time reduced from 2 to 1.25. So these are the activation times, so you can use them much more quickly. Okay, so that makes sense. So trying to buff the Shinobi a little bit as though you're going to choose it over the free farms, but you know, who plays Japanese and builds Shinobi? I don't know. The Atakabune cost reduced from 170 food, 220 wood, 220 gold, to 100 food, 220 wood, 220 gold, so just a slight food reduction there. And the Atakabune rocket damage increased from 30 to 40. So a little buff to that one, so it's a little bit easier to research, so that sounds pretty good. The Yumi Ashigaru feudal health increased from 60 to 65, so their archers are going to be slightly more tanky, which I think is really good because everyone said they're very weak, although you can mass them up quickly. I think having that little extra health is going to do wonders if you do like playing with those Japanese archers. The Tatara cost reduced from 75.25 to 50.25. Okay, so that is, I think Tatara is the level 1 Dark Age +1 melee. So I think that's pretty good. So that's going to mean that you can get that a little bit more effectively and maybe do some more Dark Age play. The Cocker Township now benefits from Military Academy. Okay, perfect, exactly. So anything produced from the Cocker Township is going to come out much more quickly. Japanese corrected the selection of some Japanese buildings where the selection bounds expected beyond its footprint. Okay, so that's just about selecting buildings. So a couple of buffs to Shinobi and a few minor changes. So Japanese are mainly staying the same. So if you're playing Japanese and you're happy, then you're going to stay happy. If you're not happy with the Japanese, then I'm sorry, it's going to be the same for another season. Let's have a look at the Mongols. So, oh wow, there's a few. Okay, so let's go from the top. Removed rally point command from Mongol Gur since they do not produce units. Okay, so you can't rally from a Gur. I think that makes sense. Destroyed Mongol landmarks that haven't unpacked can now be attacked while under repair. Okay, this is good. So if you're attacking Mongol landmarks, that's good. Fixed a bug where technology queued at a prayer tent would be removed from the queue upon the completion of monastic shrines. Okay, so that's good if you're using the prayer tent and getting all your researches. Mongol pastures sheep production time reduced from 140 to 116, and that's related to the amount of food that each sheep has now, so it's basically the same food per minute, so that makes perfect sense because the Mongols can produce their own sheep from the pastures. Then we have the Mangadai cost reduced from 120 food, 40 gold, and to 90 food and 60 gold, so double production cost reduced, and train time improved from 30 to 28. So they're much less food, but a little heavier on the gold. So actually, if you wanted to mass up Mangadai, it's actually going to be slightly easier and you don't have to wallop all of your food into it. So obviously it's very expensive with gold, but because they can fire and they've got that mobility, they can be really dangerous if you can get a load of them. So I think this sounds pretty good. The secondary town centre. Sound centre cost reduced from 900 to 850, and early horseman ranged armour increased from 1 to 2. Okay, so this means that those early horsemen will be able to run under TCs a little bit more effectively, or defensive buildings, and they'll be able to potentially go for second TCs ever so slightly more effectively. So some nice little changes to the Mongols, and I've always liked the Mangadai, not playing against them, but I think they're a really interesting unit, so hopefully we get to see a little bit more of those, especially as they are produced a little bit faster as well. The Malians. Fishing boat drop off 10% of their food as gold. So a little buff to Malian water play, but apart from that, Malians are going to still be doing the cow boom until the cows literally come home. So, yeah, that's all good for me. I know what they're going for. Let's have a look at the Ottomans then. So, military school train time multiplayer reduced from 5 to 4.7, so another nerf to military schools. Okay, interesting. So that means that the units are going to be coming out ever so slightly slower. The Istanbul Observatory is working as intended when landmark is destroyed and being rebuilt, so just a bug there with the destroyed and being rebuilt. The Grand Galley's scale production speed per age like their influence does, so that the Grand Galley is the ship military school, which I actually have never seen in a proper game, but I guess because I don't play water. And the Istanbul Imperial Observatory landmark now applies to Grand Galleys, so that's to do with the buffs to military schools. So this, along with the nerfs they got last season, actually is going to really slow down the tempo of the Ottomans, because the military schools have got slowed down and the vizier points take longer to accrue, or you need to accrue more of them. So that's going to hopefully mean that the speed at which they can get all of those units out and start pressuring you in feudal, if they go for that, is going to be slightly slower. So we might be seeing a lot more fast castles or 2 TCs and stuff like that. So hopefully it gives a lot more flexibility to the Ottomans as well. So yeah, I think that all sounds pretty good. The Rus, the fishing boat train time is increased to 46 seconds. So apart from that, Rus are going to still carry on being S tier and doing their bunty things along the way. Let's have a look at the variant civs then. So Iobids, okay. Correct an issue where Iobid villagers could not force construct stone wall bastion segments. Okay, so just a wall building thing. Military wing, reinforcements. It now takes 15 zealots for the first desert raider to spawn. This is nice. So kind of like the king nerf, the fact that they come out just ever so slightly slower is definitely going to allow you to get more units out and do some defensive work in your own base. It's only 15 seconds, but that can be the difference between having some horses out to defend or getting all of your units killed. So I think that's really, really good. The economic wing growth for castle age is reduced from 8 to 7. I think this is really good as well. Getting a massive boost of 8 villagers at that point, especially when they fast castle super, super quickly, it's just such a huge tempo boost. So I think just a slight nerf on that. I don't think Iobids are completely unbeatable. I find them particularly tricky to go against, and they're very difficult to punish their castle, but having a few of these little nerfs will just slow them down enough that it's going to feel competitive, which I think is really, really nice, because I don't want to see it where they just can't do anything. So I think this is great. The trade wing advisors, so the feudal age Atabegs increase from 2 to 3, and the castle age Atabegs increase from 4 to 5. So they buff up production buildings, if I remember correctly. I've never actually seen one in a game, but yeah, so that's pretty good change there. I think these little nerfs are just going to slow down the Ibods ever so slightly and mean you can either do some damage or defend, and I think that is definitely going to open up some more counterplay, so I like it. JD. So this is the same rework as the French, that are special artillery shot, so we're not going to go over that again, but JD is just going to stay the same. So, if you like your heroine unit, then, keep pumping those knights. The Sushi Legacy corrected an issue where the Temple of the Sun, where the building had different health. So no Order of the Dragon changes. Interesting. I know a lot of people have been hoping there's some buffs to Order of the Dragon, something that will help them out a little bit, but no changes there. So yeah, I guess we're just going to have to wait and see how they fare on the ladder at the moment. But I personally found them really tricky to play with. So hopefully they're not going to have a hard time and they might see some love next time. So we can see that there's huge things on the way. We've got a full rework of the Bruce bounty system. That sounds interesting. Hopefully it means it's going to get rid of that bounty game at the beginning, because I don't find that particularly interesting, so that sounds good to me. Deerstones will grant access to a new unit, the Khan's Hunters. Okay, wow, that sounds pretty good. The House of Learning will receive some new and compelling technologies. Okay, so this is really good. The House of Learning is a landmark I actually really love, but no one really builds it, so that sounds fun. A mid-season map pool refresh. Yes! Everyone loves to see more maps. I'd love to see like a weekly or fortnightly like one-off map that you can just ban if you want to, just for some extra variety. But mid-season refresh sounds amazing, and then more balance tweaks along the way. So, and then the patch will also see the return of our seasonal event, Map Monsters. You can expect to close out the summer if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, the return of some familiar, friendly monsters on the sea and land. Though we'll be shaking things up a bit to make it easier to enjoy the fun. Cool. So I think that sounds amazing. So some pretty interesting changes, minor changes overall, a few little nerfs to Iobids and English, which I think were warranted and should be really good, as well as the Byzantines getting a slight nerf to their initial groves. So no huge changes, but I think the balance of all the civs at the moment is actually generally pretty good. So I think this is just going to slightly push down those top civilizations and push the other ones up. And I'm really excited to have a look at these maps and see them in the rotation for a little bit more variety. But I hope you've enjoyed this little review of the patch notes, my platinum perspective, the plebs perspective on the notes, and I'd love to see in the comments what you like, what changes you found most interesting, and what you wish they had done or they're going to do next time. But until I see you next time, I hope you enjoy playing some Age of Empires, and yeah, then we'll hit the ladder together in a bit.